Before we dive into today's episode, I want to say a big thank you to our sponsor, PensionBee. They're a leading online pension provider, making it easier for people, especially single parents like us, to feel confident about saving for retirement. Along with their easy-to-use app, their podcast can also help you build confidence with your personal finances. The Pension Confident podcast is a monthly show covering pensions, ISAs, mortgages, and more. Listen to the Pension Confident podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can find it on YouTube and in the PensionBee app too. Just remember, as with all investments, your capital is at risk. Thanks again to PensionBee for supporting this episode. Hi, I'm Zoë Desmond, the founder of Frolo, the award-winning app for single parents that features both community and dating modes. And I'm also co-author, along with my wonderful friend Rebecca Cox that I made through Frolo, of the book How to Be a Happy Single Parent. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Frolo podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Chantal Contorines, a certified high-conflict divorce and co-parenting coach, whose mission is to empower parents who are navigating one of the toughest journeys there is, co-parenting with a narcissistic or controlling ex-partner. With a background in teaching, a double major in English and psychology, certification in high conflict divorce coaching, and her own experience of emerging from a 25-year marriage and high conflict separation, Chantal brings both personal insight and deep professional expertise. She helps parents move from surviving to thriving, helping them set boundaries, understand what they're up against, protect their children, and reclaim lives. Chantal, thank you so much for being here. I don't know if I got the bit about your 25-year marriage right, because I'm doing the maths and that couldn't be.
I was in a relationship for 25 years.
Yeah, because I was like, wait, hang on.
But that was the best introduction ever. I think I want to go through life like that. This is everybody meet Chantal Contorines.
Yes.
You pretty much hit all the high notes of my life, or the low notes, depending on how you look at it.
Well, I'm glad. And I have to say, I was looking at your Instagram page recently, and I was just blown away by how you managed to capture the whole experience in the co-parenting with someone like this.
Well, we call it co-parenting, but it's really counter-parenting.
Yes. Yes.
You can't co-parent with a person who's incapable of compromise.
Exactly. And it just... yeah. So I just looked at it and I was like, wow, there is this woman knows like this, it just, you hit every note and every chord. And I think there was a huge amount of people commenting on your post saying the same thing, spot on. Wow, that's resonates on every level. So I guess starting at the most obvious point, how do you know about this? How are you able to write these posts that resonate so deeply with people, and what led you to this work?
Well, I do have a background in psychology. I have to preface that by saying I am not a psychologist. I'm not even a therapist, but my background is in psychology. And prior to doing this work, I worked with children. So my specialty was dyslexia. And so my mission has always been to help children. I love children, all ages. And I've just morphed my teaching from teaching children to teaching their parents, and equipping their parents with the tools and the resources and the strategies to be able to sustain this momentum. When you're up against a narcissist or an abuser, all these words are interchangeable. Narcissist, abuser, coercive controller, they all mean the same thing, a person who's in it for power and control. And if you've been in a relationship with one of these people and you share children with one of these people, the abuse doesn't end just because the relationship ends. It just morphs into post-separation abuse. So my background in psychology helped me to understand the psychology behind this, which is quite fascinating, truthfully, that people adapt in this maladaptive way to control people. My own experience navigating separation and divorce was kind of the eye-opener. And then my friends and the people that I knew around me, and I've always just love to devour information. And my brother is the same. And he sends me these massive tomes. And it's all about like, the in-depth psychology of, personality disorders. And so I've just learned on the fly. And I've immersed myself in the literature and the studies. And I happen to know a lot of people who are narcissistic. Once you meet one and you understand it, I think they just operate. They're just everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And they are the most loving people outwardly. They can be like your really great neighbor who cuts your grass for you, or the priest who, has the congregation wrapped around their finger, or the philanthropist, or the person who's volunteering at school lunches, or even your child's teacher, or your child's therapist. They are everywhere. And they don't look like anybody that is different. They look just like you and me. And they oftentimes present as very loving, caring, charismatic, generous, benevolent, thoughtful. And I call it their curated mask. They really have this one persona that they present to the outside world, and then a totally different persona that's actually who they really are. And that only gets unleashed with the people that are tethered to them.
Yes. So what does that look like when you're, say, co-parenting? What does post-separation abuse look like? Or again, you're not co-parenting with them.
We call it co-parenting because that's what we are legally forced to do. They're like, unless you have a judge who's very astute and on the ball and, orders you to parallel parent, most people are legally bound to co-parent. But for co-parenting to exist, there needs to be compromise. There needs to be open, genuine communication. There needs to be a mutual need and a want and a desire to actually put your children, best interest first. And so post-separation abuse is all of the things. And so typically abuse actually amplifies after a person leaves or escapes. And they will use the court systems. So they'll either prolong things, delay, stall, not produce financial disclosure, lie about that stuff. And the court just assumes that when you are in court and you're saying, this is how much money I make, or this is the truth, that you're being truthful. There's like an honest presumption of honesty. But narcissists lie all the time, and they believe their own lies. Or they'll file motion after motion after motion, and they'll keep bringing you back to court just when you think things are finally, I'm, able to have my head above water. They're like, actually, let's go back to court. And that financially drains people. It also emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, psychologically drains people. It's not just that financial aspect. So legal abuse is actually all of the abuse is wrapped into one little pretty package because it financially drains people and it also emotionally drains people. But what they really love to do is they love to have smear campaigns, which often start before you've even left. And it can be subtle, like, oh, Zoe is just presenting as a little bit depressed and a little bit worried about her mental health right now. And friends and family like, oh. And then when you actually leave or they leave and they discard you and you start to act out, they're like, see, look at that. I told you Zoe was unhinged. But they come across as a concerned person as opposed to a person who's trying to, ruin your character and your value. They also love to use your children against you. So they will put children smack dab in the middle of adult conflict that they create. And they will weaponize children against a protective parent. They will, lie to the child about this person. They will have them spy on their parent. They'll have them so dysregulated that when you get your children back, the children are either mimicking your ex and all their horrible mannerisms. That's very triggering for a person who has experienced abuse, or they'll be very combative with their siblings. They'll be dismissive. They'll be rude. So post-separation abuse continues until your children are at least 18 and possibly even longer than that.
It's so depressing.
It is. And that is like the radical reality of what most people who are dealing with this. There are the odd case where there's a judge or a great lawyer and everything just works out perfectly. And the children and the adult victims are protected and they never have to. I firmly believe that if there's any abuse, there should be no access to children. It's just it causes so much needless and avoidable trauma.
Well, this is one of the questions that I would actually love to ask you about because it's so it's all so confusing. Obviously, with the abuser, they try, as you say, they lie, they manipulate, they try and cause chaos over here, delay tactic over here, obstruction over here. And it's all just grenades everywhere to kind of.
And they love that.
Yeah.
They love to create chaos, right? They throw everything and then nobody knows what's up. Everybody thinks it's, we call it high conflict divorce, which is a little bit misleading because it just takes one party to create the conflict and the other party's merely responding to the conflict. And there's this erroneous belief that it's two parties. It's a two-party conflict when oftentimes it's just one person who doesn't want to give up power and control. And they don't, because they really view people as things. And they've invested a lot of time and energy into you and conditioning you and training you to be at their beck and their call and do what they want. And you've had the audacity to move on, even if you escaped, even if they had discarded you in the worst possible way and moved in with your sister or your brother and had children out of wedlock. If you dare to move on, if you dare to try to heal and grow, if you dare to repartner with somebody who's wonderful, or if you just are living your best life and creating boundaries, they can't stand that. That smacks of abandonment to them and it triggers them. And so their goal is to break you. This is the reality. There's so much you can do, though, to create a life you love. And this is the work that I do, because I really, so many people feel hopeless and helpless and desperate and depressed and overwhelmed and stressed and disempowered.
The following is a paid advertisement from BetterHelp. I want to talk about mental health for a minute. Being a single parent comes with its highs and lows, and as single parents, it's so important to make sure we look after ourselves in the process. That's why I'm excited to introduce you to BetterHelp, the online therapy service that's here to support you every step of the way. With BetterHelp, you can connect with registered therapists from the comfort of your own home. Whether you're feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or just need someone to talk to, they're here to help. Plus, as a Frolo member, you get an exclusive 25% off your first month. Just visit betterhelp.com/Frolo. That's betterhelp.com/Frolo. Yes, and that is exactly why the work you're doing is so important, and what I'd love us to kind of unpack in this conversation. I guess there's so many, as we discussed before we hit record, I was saying that whenever we do anything that highlights this post-separation abuse, it gets so much interest from our community, which unfortunately, all that does is highlight how much it resonates with people and how kind of seen people feel in something that makes them feel so alone. So it would be, really great, as well as kind of, I suppose, reassuring people that they're not alone. There are so many people going through this.
And it's meant to be isolating, right? Abusers want to isolate you and make you feel like you have nobody around you. And oftentimes you end up isolating yourself because you're so exhausted and you don't know who to talk to and nobody really understands. You might be fortunate enough to have friends and families who know you and love you and support you. But unless they've experienced this themselves, they can't actually fathom that a person would be this way. So they sometimes doubt you, what you're saying. They might think that you're exaggerating, that you're, just being too sensitive, that if you just learn to communicate in a different way, maybe things wouldn't be this way. But maybe it's also a bruised ego. You did leave them. So maybe if you just give them some time and placate them a little bit, they might, not be this way. And so abuse is isolating, and it's so sad to me that people feel so alone and like they are part of the problem. And this is oftentimes people who are survivors will say, I oftentimes doubt my intent and I wonder if I'm the actual problem here. And that's exactly what gaslighting does, is it makes you doubt who you are. And it tears away at your autonomy and your sense of self and your value for yourself. And it's so tragic to me that so many people feel like they're all by themselves and nobody understands and that nobody's experienced what they've experienced.
Exactly. And I think for people that can't possibly comprehend what abuse, living with this kind of abuse actually feels like, then, and if it's someone that is just their very nature is to, give someone the benefit of the doubt, because hopefully we all want to assume that most people are good and all of that. So sometimes asking questions like, but I don't get it. Why would they do that? And that doesn't make sense.
Or they were always so nice to me. Like they were always so, and that's part of what an abuser does, is they make people buy into who they pretend to be. It curates their facade, allows them to blend in seamlessly, but it also then casts doubt and dispersions about the person who's talking about them. Well,
exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. Like he used to, cut my grass for me, or, he was at the library in the school every Friday helping the kids. That's not who I know.
Exactly.
And
so it's so insidious, like all of the different ways that it can be, that it can eat away at somebody. And yeah, there's so much. My mind is
and people also don't want to get involved in conflict. So they can deal with like a little bit of drama, quote unquote drama, for like 6 months maybe. But if it goes past that, they're like, oh, man, this person is really tiring. And so people find themselves, their communities go from this big and they start to shrink to this big. And then people who mean well just don't know what to do and they don't know what to say. And so they stop saying anything, they stop connecting, and then it isolates people even more. So that's why social media is so wonderful, is that it connects people who otherwise might feel like they're an island onto themselves.
Absolutely. So much to unpack. So thinking about kids in this situation. So one of the questions I have for you, and we've kind of touched on your thoughts on it already, but say for instance, if a person is is dealing with separation, post-separation abuse in a co-parenting relationship, and the kids are, and say for instance, if it's 50-50, or if the
which
abuser
is the presumed,
yeah, exactly. And the kids love their other parent.
All children love their parents, even if
exactly.
They're being abused. They're just like the dog. You can kick the dog and the dog keeps coming back for more.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the other parent, but, obviously there's the one parent that's the non-abuser, protective parent, trying to kind of do everything right by the kid and act from the kid's best interest all of the time. And the other parent uses the kid as a pawn, manipulates, badmouths the other parent, focuses on parental alienation, does, so that the kid almost sees the abuser as the victim and starts seeing the safe parent as the kind of bad guy, as the aggressor. But then the safe parent is not going to say, well, look, your other parent is X, Y, and Z, because they don't want to drive the kid any further into that. So how do we protect our kids in that situation? And if the kid is saying, well, I really, really love my other parent, should they still be, if someone's an abuser, should it still be 50-50? How does it work? What's your view?
I am very, very pro 0%, because the abuse leaves such lasting scars on children. All children love both parents. It doesn't matter how you treat your children. You see it all the time. You see it in movies. Kids just love their parents. They're constantly looking for their parents to love them and give them attention. And so kids will morph and they'll acquiesce and they'll submit and they'll do whatever they need to find this parent's love, to get that parent to focus their attention on them. It's biological safety. It's how they secure safety and they live. And so when one parent is sporadic, when one parent is not consistent, they're inconsistent. And I truly do not believe that abuse and love can coexist. So if you abuse somebody, you don't love them. And if you love somebody, you don't abuse them. And I think this is really hard for people to accept, that a parent can't love a child. But these parents know what they're doing, because they're able to turn it on and turn it off. So when certain people are looking, they can be the best parent in the world and they're hugging their child and telling little Johnny how proud of them they are for their 15 shots that they scored in their game today. But behind closed doors, when there is no audience anymore, they're not trying to impress somebody. Why didn't you score 5 extra shots? Oh, you got 100% on your test. Why didn't you get the bonus? And so children are constantly looking to this parent. So I truly believe, even though children love their parent, they should not have access to a parent who is going to traumatize them over and create so many long-lasting issues. Yes, it would be hard to say no to a child to see their parent, but also it takes away the fact that they are going to be abused every interaction, and they're going to be used. And the betrayal trauma that comes when they realize later on, when they're out of the house and they don't have to be under this parent's thumb all the time, that they were used as a pawn to hurt their other parent, that really runs deep. And those are scars that can heal, but they never go away. And the pain.
So it's kind of, I guess there's two things that spring to mind. There's then, if you, as the safe parent, think about that long-term damage and do everything you can to bite the bullet and protect that kid and swoop them up to kind of protect them from that ongoing damage and that long-term damage, but then worry that the kid is then going to turn on you, the safe parent, and blame you because the other parent has set that up to kind of make out like you're trying to, take them away from the other parent anyway, or whatever other narrative has been said to the kid. So there's that. How do you deal with that? And then there's separately even dealing with the courts, because I don't know about, over in Canada where you are, but in the UK where I live, it's very much kind of 50-50 is sort of the status quo. So it's, I guess there's so many different aspects. It's sometimes I hear people say to people in this situation, well, why don't you just, get full custody? And it's kind of as if it's like click the fingers and, oh yeah, good idea.
Even if you have evidence of abuse.
Yeah.
Even if you have evidence of abuse, it's the presumption that this parent has the right to see. Children are considered property to be divided equally between two divorcing people. And that's 50-50, right? So you split everything. You split your assets, you split your debts. Children are considered an asset to be split 50-50. And abuse is always minimized. It's always, well, they were just having a bad day, so let's put them in some anger management. They know how to manage their anger. They absolutely do. This is not that they lose control. They just are able to hold it in when they need to, and then be themselves when they don't need to pretend to be anything else. And so the court, it's a worldwide family court crisis. And some people think it's against women. Some people think it's against men. And doing the work that I do, I can tell you from my perspective, it's all survivors. It doesn't matter if you're a man. It doesn't matter if you're a woman. The court enables abusers. It enables, empowers, and emboldens abusers because they're really crafty. They've spent their entire lives learning how to lie and manipulate. And they typically hire the best attorneys, and those attorneys are the ones who are typically unscrupulous and will absolutely lie in court as well. You and I will hire, the good lawyer, the one who, actually plays by the rules. So we have a guppy and they have a shark. And they oftentimes, do really well in court. The average person becomes very emotional and very triggered and very reactive, and is scared to go to court. Court is scary for the average person. For a narcissist, for an abuser, it's like their playroom. They just get to go up there on stage and they get to perform. And remember, they've spent their entire lives learning how to perform, learning how to get people to believe what they're selling. They're the ultimate con artists.
So for anyone who is about to navigate the family court process with one of these abusers, or is going through it at the moment, and is kind of thinking, oh my God, I'm doomed. Everything is, the courts aren't on. Okay, what have you learned? What kind of, how can people navigate it in a way that sets them up for the best chance of, the success and the best chance of the abuser revealing their true colors or showing their true colors in the process?
So being strategic and being proactive and preventative. So typically people leave and they don't know what they're doing. They hire a lawyer first. Now, a lot of lawyers will tell you exactly what you want to hear. And a lot of lawyers pretend like they understand this, but they don't. And so my first piece of advice is before you even hire a lawyer, and I have so many clients who come to me, I have members who are like, I really want, there's this obvious abuse. I want to go to court and I want to get more. And my honest answer is you absolutely can. I never tell people what to do, but the chances of you being successful in getting more custody of your children is really slim. And it's going to cost you a lot of time and a lot of money. And with that time, it comes your energy, your stress levels are going to go high, your anxiety, your ability to focus on what you actually can control, which is yourself, is going to plummet as well. And it also gives your abuser access to you. And now they understand what you truly care about, which they always knew was the children. And so what they're going to do is go after that even more every time you interact with them. So my advice is be very cautious, be very strategic. Hire a divorce coach who understands coercive control, who understands an abuser's playbook. They will help you hire the right lawyer. So many people hire the wrong lawyer and then they fire them and they don't understand what that actually means. So you put down a retainer, say of $10,000 for your lawyer, and you've used them for a year and they're just really horrible and they don't advocate for you and you can never get a hold of them and they don't know how to actually present a case. Then you fire them and you rehire a new lawyer. Well, that lawyer also needs a retainer. So you're out another $10,000 and they have to be put up to speed with your prior case, which costs you money. Every second that they are engaged with you costs you money. So if you can hire the right lawyer, and oftentimes, truthfully, that is a more expensive lawyer. And I see a lot of people go, well, I can't afford that. So they hire a cheaper lawyer only to have to fire that lawyer and hire the more expensive lawyer. So they've already wasted 20, 50, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. I have clients who have spent millions of dollars in court. This is the reality. And also, you really have to decide what is worth fighting for. There are some battles that you absolutely have to fight, and you fight those tooth and nail, but you do so strategically, intentionally, with the best documentation and the best mouthpiece you can hire. And that also means that sometimes you actually have to do a lot of the background work. So you present what you do behind scenes can really help your lawyer. So if you're scattered and if you're sending them emails every time you get a text from your ex, that is not going to be productive. It's not going to be a good use of your time. So if you can do a lot of background work, that also helps to cut down costs. And then you have to decide what is worth fighting for. That's it. And if if it's not worth fighting for, then you don't go to court. And you focus on what I always work with my clients on, what can you control in life? And the only thing in life that you can ever control is yourself. And so focus on how you show up for your children, on your healing, on your growth, on your empowerment, on your education. And that often involves investing in the right community. It's great to have family and friends, but unless they understand this, they're not going to be able to support you the way that you need to be supported. And also invest in the right expert support. This is going to be an ultra marathon that you didn't sign up for. And so if you don't have the right experts guiding you, you're going to be constantly blindsided by this person.
So for somebody who is co-parenting with an abuser and is trying to figure out, well, what is my, what is the right path here? Do I just stay in this and be basically abused and the coercive control and the obstruction and everything is a battle and I can never raise an eyebrow, or it has to be their way or the highway and all of that, and the kid is used as a pawn? Or do I buckle up, go through the court system, try and protect the kid by getting more time and putting better boundaries in place? How does somebody, how does somebody decide?
The ideal answer would be the latter. You go to battle. If the court system was educated and actually cared. You have to think, I think a lot of judges are exactly this type of personality themselves. And so they protect their own. A lot of them are ignorant to what abuse actually looks like. They're like, I'm like your mom and dad who's like, yeah, well, it wasn't physical. I've actually been in court and I've heard those words. Well, there was no physical abuse. The child has just read an affidavit talking about how their dad abused them, like emotionally, mentally, and psychologically. And the dad's lawyer stood up and said, well, there was no physical abuse. So did abuse actually happen? The child just poured their heart out, and they're like a 20-year-old, and they've told you what they experienced. This should not even be a question, right? So you're up against that kind of archaic. If there was no physical violence, was there actually even abuse? People don't understand the nuances of abuse, an abuser never has to raise their hand or their voice for it to be abuse. There's so many ways to abuse a person that never even means that you yell at them or that you call them a name or that you hit them or throw things or, you can abuse a person in a billion other ways, and it's a death by a million paper cuts. The only person who can ever answer that question is the person who's going to embark in that battle or choose to not engage in that battle, because it's such a personal choice. I could help guide them if they were a client, but I don't ever like to tell people what to do. At the end of the day, you know your abuser better than anybody else. Yes, they've been watching you and they're a predator and you're their prey, but you've lived with this person. You know what makes them tick, what makes them salivate, what makes them chomp at the bit. You also know like their weak points and like their some people are very cheap and they don't want to have to go to court. So if you know that your ex is going to avoid court, but they keep threatening to go to court, it's probably just an empty threat. If you know, however, that your ex loves the limelight, loves to have a good, mic access, and has some money or has family who has money, then if they're threatening you to go to court, chances are they're going to follow through with that threat. And so only you can actually answer that question. Do I try and go to court and fight? And most protective parents want to do that because in every other aspect of life, people who protect their children are acknowledged as heroes. This is the only place in life where a protective parent is told that they're being unreasonable, that they're bitter, that they're just not letting go of their ex. And well, they're not that bad. And I say it's like your house is on fire and you've managed to escape, but your children are still stuck in the house and you've been told that you can't go back in there to save your children. That's what it feels like.
That's an amazing analogy.
Right? And it's brutal. And this is what so many of my clients and my members have to radically accept, that it's absolutely horrible. And they grieve that. And the grieving is not just like, oh, I'm going to grieve like 6 hours on Monday and then I'm going to get over it. Grieving, we're going to grieve. I still grieve. And it's not often, but I still go, okay. And you grieve so many things, like the co-parenting relationship that it could have been had your ex not chosen to be this way. And, like when your child is hurting, you would want to call this person up and say, hey, Matt, let's get together because our child is hurting and let's come up with a plan to support them in both of our homes. If you do that, you've just given your ex some fodder and they're going to twist that and they're going to use that to hurt you by hurting the child. And so what I do is I really have my clients and my members focus on what they can do. And what that looks like is investing in themselves and really trying to heal and grow and create a safe space for their children to land when they come back. And oftentimes as a protective parent, you're going to get the worst of your children. And people are like, oh, I'm such a bad parent. My child is always so like rude with me and they don't listen and they slam doors, or they just want to be in their room and they don't want to engage. It's actually because your child trusts you. It's actually because they know that your love is unconditional. Like no matter how they are, you're always going to love them. And when they're with their other parent, they have to shut everything off. They have to suppress all of their wants, desires, needs, beliefs, opinions, and their love in order to get this parent to pay attention to them and give them any modicum of affection and attention.
Yeah, it's so brutal. And it's like a version of the kind of coercive control on the kid as well, because the kid has to adhere to whatever that other parent wants them to say or do to be the good child in their eyes.
Well, just like we always forget what we experienced in this relationship is exactly what our children experience in this relationship, but it's that much more confusing because it's their parent. At least as adults, we probably understood at some level what abuse was. Even if we didn't understand the very nuances of it, we knew that abuse existed and abusers were out there. We may not have realized that we were being abused while we were in the relationship. So many survivors leave and they have a delayed realization. Like it can happen 6 months, 3 years later, like, I was abused. That was abuse. And then they unravel. But when you're in it as a child, that child is experiencing abuse. So when people say, well, the relationship is over, the children are safe, they only abused you. That's cockamamie, because an abuser will always go after the children, because abuse is always about power and control, and they will use the children to exert power over you and to control you.
Yes. And even as we were saying, people who don't understand this kind of, only people who have experienced it will truly understand what it looks like, what it means, the nuance, all of that. And, which is why, as you mentioned, a lot of people, get more and more isolated in the experience, because friends might drop away because they're like, listen, there's a lot of drama over there, just chill out. It's not that bad, or whatever. But, so it's hard for an adult to understand. So how can a kid doesn't know, a kid can't possibly understand what coercive control is, or what, any of this. And it's scary to think about how it impacts, kids' sense of safety in relationships going forward, in trust,
So I did actually create a free resource for parents. And you talked about, because I want children to understand. We have to educate our children to understand what abuse looks like. I really firmly believe that we don't ever disparage their other parent. That is their parent, and they love them, and it's part of them. I also don't believe in gaslighting our children. So if our children have questions and they ask these honest questions, as hard as it is, because the legal system says, you've just spoken badly about their other parent, so you must be alienating them. I really believe that we don't gaslight our children. We give them age-appropriate information. And so for some children, that's the whole hog. And for other children, it's just a little bite size. But my free resource is how to talk about abuse with children. And it uses books and movies as the springboard and the catalyst for parents to start talking about and using those, the terminology. Kids are so smart. And when we equip them with the words and the concepts that most of us didn't understand until later, triangulation, smear campaign, coercive control, all of these words, the golden child, and we have conversations. And the earlier we start, the easier it is. It's not to say that it's not impossible when you have a teenager, but obviously teens have, a whole lot of other baggage, hormones, they're already set in their ways, but it's still possible. It just, you have to work a little harder. Whereas a young child is far more malleable and they're more open and receptive. So the younger you start, the better off you're all going to be, the easier your job is a protective parent to protect your children and give them the information. I really teach a lot about critical thinking, right? So just because I tell you that I love you, do my actions line up with that? So I can use the words I love you, but talk is cheap. Do I show you that I love you? And so create a love board as a family. What does love actually look like? What does it feel like? And what does it sound like? And so when someone tells them that they love them, they can go back to this board that you've all created as a family that hangs up in your dining room, your kitchen, or your TV room. And they can say, well, actually, no, that isn't love, because love looks like this. It feels like a warm hug. It's gentleness. It's peace. It's holding my hand. It's hugging me when I'm sad and reassuring me. So when somebody tells me that they love me, but they're not doing these things, it's actually not love, it's manipulation.
Yes, I love that. It's such a great idea. And it's, so important to kind of help our kids understand what love actually is. And it's not them being perfect. It's not them having to do whatever it is in order to, comply. And
parental love should be unconditional. And I have people who backlash again. No, there is no such thing as unconditional love. I am sorry. If you're a protective parent, your job is to love your children unconditionally. It doesn't mean you accept all of their bad behavior. I tell my children, for instance, I love you unconditionally. What that means for me is you could kill somebody. I would still love you. I would not condone the behavior, and you would have to face the consequences for your actions, but I would be there supporting you as you face the music. I still love you. I would really dislike the behavior though, but I still love you. And it's really important that we help children differentiate, because in the other home, their behavior is a direct relationship to how the parent is. When they act well, their parent's loving. And when they don't act well, the parent's mad. We're not responsible for anybody else's emotions here. And we have to teach our children that, right? We're only responsible for ourselves. Obviously, it doesn't mean that we go through life being assholes, but other people's like emotional reactions to life is not our responsibility.
Yeah. Do you have any, just trying to give people something positive to kind of some hope, something positive to cling on to? Do you have any success stories about people who have been in?
Oh, so many. Almost every one of my clients has had a positive shift in their life. It just takes time. This is the thing. First of all, I always believe in being hopeful. You have to, even in the darkest, I've had clients who have come to me who have lost all their children. Their children have been completely alienated. They have no contact with them. But by continuing to show up for themselves, right? I always tell my clients, you have to take care of yourself. You have to find out who you are outside of being a parent. And that's going to help guide you. And when you're doing well, your children will naturally do well. And so for all of my clients, we really work on that and healing themselves, because they are a model for what is possible when you escape. Because remember, our children are going to be having to escape this abusive relationship at some point or another. And so there is so much hope. And yes, it is a labor intense act. Like, you actually have to do the work. But when you do the work and you show up for yourself, your life literally can change. I see it every day. And I'm not exaggerating. People come and they're despondent and they're feeling helpless and they're feeling like they have no power, because abusers take away your power. And if you do the work and you have the right community, and community is everything, which is why I created my membership, because I knew that people needed to connect with other people going through the same things while also having expert support. You just need the right tools. And no matter where you are in your journey, there's always hope that things can change, but you have to take action. You can't just pray. I'm a big believer in prayer too. That's beautiful, but you have to follow your hope and prayer up with actual action. Like, you have to do stuff, and you have way more power than you even understand or realize.
And which is why as well, community is so important, to kind of be able to be bolstered up by that community.
I just had a member going through a legal battle, and I was coaching her on the sidelines outside of her office hours. And she's like, oh, and she named 2 other members. And she's like, oh yeah, they were coaching me today too. And I was like, oh, that's music. That's like literally why I built this community, was so that not only would they have me, but they'd have other people who got what they were going through, and could just support them.
It's so, so important. Have you ever seen a narcissist or an abuser change their ways? No, I kind of knew that was going to be your answer.
I'm always so hesitant as to those self-professed, self-proclaimed changed abusers that we see. There's a couple of them on social media that claim to be, healed and going down a different path. I'm hesitant to believe the accuracy of those statements, because abusers don't ever change. They really don't. Like, maybe 0.01% of the population, but typically it's when they've hit rock bottom. And that typically comes with age. The older they get, the smaller their circle becomes, because people start to see them for who they really are. And unless they travel all the time and they're like constantly moving, they burn more bridges than a pyro. And at the end of their lives, 40 typically is the age, 40, 50, where they start to unravel. They start to lose their looks, their circle of acquaintances. They don't really ever have friends. They might seem to have a lot of people in their lives, but it's superficial acquaintances. It's not people that they actually do deep dives with. So yeah, and time is our best friend and it's their worst enemy. So just give things time. You're playing the long game here.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable, really valuable to note. It is playing the long game. It is patience. It is documenting. It is just trusting that the more mud they throw, the more grenades they set off, it will start to all show.
And everything implodes. This always, the truth always comes out. And I truly, firmly believe that love always wins. Hoping that it's going to change, right? I'm like, you actually have to take action.
Yes.
But I see it all the time. I see people who come in just broken and feeling so like, why bother? I have members who have, thought about suicide because it's just like, I want to end this pain, and they're thriving.
Great. And you've mentioned that the court system needs reform, and what needs to change in the court system and in society in order to protect people?
First of all, education. So this is why I will talk. I am so much fun at parties. People are like, so what do you do for a living, Chantal? I'm like, well, let me tell you. People need to understand what abuse really is and how abusers really present. There's the erroneous belief that they're these monsters who are very obvious, and they're not. They can be very charming. They can be your best friend's husband or girlfriend. And the court system needs to hold abusers accountable. They actually need to listen to children. Now, and I say that with some hesitation, because the longer children have to live with this abusive parent, the more likely they are to align with this parent. So I have a lot of people who come to me and their children are young and they're like, I don't like going to mom or dad's house. I'm like, I want to stay with you 100% of the time. And the courts don't listen to young children. The courts typically around 14 start to listen to children and take their voice into account. But by that time, this abusive parent has twisted the child. And so oftentimes you'll have a child who's now like, well, actually, I don't want to go to your house looking at the protective parent. I want to stay with this parent more. And all of a sudden, this abusive parent's like, well, I'm just respecting their wishes. They don't, I don't know what to do. Do you want me to drag the 6'5" child to your house? They obviously don't want to go with you. So we need to listen to children when they're young, when they actually have a voice, when they're actually not being coached by the abusive parent.
Well, what about when the children are being coached? What about even when they're young?
Like everybody it's a real pay to play industry. So there's so many court professionals who are supposed to be doing things in the children's best interest, but they have no education. They're not trauma informed. They don't understand coercive control. When you understand it, you can actually start to pay attention to the patterns and go, oh, okay, well, 5 months ago, little Johnny was adamant that they didn't want to go to this parent's house. And now 5 months later, little Johnny is saying, actually, I want to live full time with this parent. What's changed in that 5 months? So education is key. And people need to be held accountable. So for these people who keep going back to court, why are they going back to court? Why are they filing motions? And actually being held accountable. So if you're forcing your ex to go back to court because you're not complying, well, let's look at that. If you're filing motions and forcing your ex back to court because you're just an asshole and wants them to bring them back to court all the time, let's keep looking at that pattern as opposed to it being just these isolated incidents. And we talk about vexatious litigation, but nothing is actually ever done about that.
What does vexatious litigation mean?
It's legal abuse. So it's going back to court all the time, right? And so it is supposed to be something that's against the law. We're not supposed to be able to do that. And you can be held accountable. But again, just like in BC, where I live, coercive control is against the law. Well, good luck trying to prove that in court.
Yes.
Like, how do I prove coercion when it's subtle?
Yes, completely. And then sometimes I think as much as sometimes the abuser is the one trying to kind of drag the other parent through the court system, I think sometimes the abuser is causing so much obstruction. And so, just kind of abandoning all the terms of the court order.
Oh, yeah. Because they believe that they're above the law.
Yes. So then they leave the other parent no choice but to go back to court.
Yeah. So you can abuse both ways. You can either not comply with your order, forcing the other parent back to court, or you can file motion after motion after motion. And both are legal abuse. And legal abuse is every form of abuse under one perfect little umbrella. It's financial abuse, it's emotional abuse, psychological abuse, it's physical abuse, because the stress eats away at your body and wreaks havoc on your system as well.
Oh my God, I want to I want to put ad spend behind this episode so that people, it's just so important. It's just so important to educate people and for people to feel less alone.
Oh, I can't even tell you, you are not alone. If you're listening to this, you are not alone. And if you're listening to this and this resonates, I am so sorry that people are not doing their jobs and they're not protecting you and your children from the abuse that you're obviously experiencing. You don't have to justify how you're behaving or reacting, because I understand. And the system has let you and your children down. And that is the honest truth. And you have to grieve that, because that is so unjust. We are told that we have to leave. If there's abuse in the home, we have to leave. And then we leave, and then nobody supports us because nobody believes us. And it's the presumption of 50-50, which then tethers you to your abuser indefinitely, which is why they have children.
Yeah, thank you for acknowledging that. I'm sure there are so many people that will listen to this conversation that will feel seen, feel heard, feel less alone, feel more sane, feel more empowered. So with that in mind, where can people find you and the great work that you're doing and connect with you? And then finally, just one thing to kind of leave this episode on, because I could speak to you for hours about this. We could, there's a lot to unpack. We might have to do a round two. And then finally, just if there is, I guess one piece of, I suppose, hope that you can leave people on, or one action item for people to really kind of take back the reins. So yeah, where to find you, and maybe one piece of hope.
Social media, I'm Chantal.Contorines.coaching. You can also find me on my website, chantelcontorinescoaching.com. There's lots of ways to work with me privately, as a group. And also I have lots of free stuff. So I have my podcast, I have my weekly newsletter, I have my free ebook, and my free daily content. I try to produce a lot of free stuff because I do understand financial abuse, and not everybody has access to money, which is also why I created my lower cost group, because you get 4 hours of group coaching a month, plus an expert that comes in every month. So it's cheaper than an hour of therapy. And you get so much community. And you really, as a protective parent, need to focus on yourself. I know that seems counterintuitive. We always want to take care of our children, but it's like putting your own oxygen mask on first before you put on your children's. If you are not taking care of yourself, you are not going to be able to show up for yourself and for those you love, especially your children. When you focus on yourself, on your healing, on your growth, on your connection to people who love you and care about you, your life will change. I promise you. It doesn't mean it's not going to be hard. It's still going to be hard. This person will never change, but you can change. And that's where your power lies. It's focusing on yourself and what you can control. And when you do that, honestly, things do shift. It's not overnight, but you'll start to see your quality of life improves. And when your quality of life improves, guess who also benefits from that? It's your kids.
Chantel, thank you so much for this conversation and for the work that you're doing. It is so unbelievably important. And I'm going to stay tuned to everything that you're doing. And I'm sure that lots of people will be logging on to your page and your Instagram and looking up your community as well. So yes, thank you so much. And I do hope that we can do a round two sometime.
Oh, I'd love to do a round 2 and a round 3 and a round 4. I could talk, this is what I said, I'm so much fun at parties, and I'm not, because I could talk about this all day long, because it's so important that people are educated about this for themselves, yes, and also to help other people.
Yeah. And there's actually quite a lot of questions that I didn't ask that I'm going to save for round 2, because that's how much there is to unpack. Okay. Well, I hope you have I know it's the beginning of your day over there in Canada. And I know you said you've got a beautiful new puppy to enjoy. So go and enjoy your new puppy and your day. And it was so lovely to speak with you.
Thank you so much, Zoe, for having me on and for having this discussion. It's so needed.
And that's a wrap for this week. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, then I have one small favor to ask. Please can you take a minute to subscribe to the Frolo podcast and give us a rating and review? This really helps other single parents who might benefit from it find us. The Frolo app, which is fully user verified for user safety, is available on the Google Play Store and the App Store, and you can find out more info and download links at www.frolo.com, or follow us on Instagram @FroloApp. And you can purchase your copy of our book, How to Be a Happy Single Parent at all the major book retailers. Until next time, have a great week.